Hi, I'm Dr. Cynthia Clark, acupuncture physician, applied clinical nutritionist, and creator of Energy Evolution. And right now we're talking about cognitive decline. This is part 3 in our series on cognitive decline and how to prevent and reverse Alzheimer's. Now, one of the questions that I get asked most often is, well, isn't that just genetic? I'm destined to get this horrible, awful disease because my mother, father, sister, aunt got it, and so therefore I have no choice, I'm going to get it. And there are two things that I would tell you. One is that it takes 10,000 years for a gene to mutate. We didn't have this gene 2,000 years ago. Something's happening that's changing in our environment, and that's changing us. So the increase in Alzheimer's and cognitive decline dementia that we're seeing isn't just genetic, and it cannot possibly be attributed entirely to genetics. So that means that it's our environment. And the great news about that is that we can do something about our environment. For example, we've talked about some of the reasons so far. We've talked about trauma, like concussion, falling down, hitting yourself on your head. That's a good reason to really pay attention to your mental capacity over time, because that messes up your gut-brain connection. Leaky brain causes leaky gut, and leaky gut causes leaky brain. We also talked about inflammation, and that's a big deal because inflammation in our body crosses the blood-brain barrier and gets into our brain. In fact, studies show that people who are not sensitive to gluten, that have zero gluten sensitivity, who eat gluten, 30 days later, half of the brain inflammation is still there. So unfortunately in America, this is not a European situation, but here in America, we do a bunch of weird stuff to our grain. We put a bunch of glycophosphate on it. We harvest it. We kill it before we harvest it in order to save the sharpness of the tools that they're harvested with. And then of course, we GMO'd it. We had good intentions for all of these things. It was all about process improvement. My undergraduate degree is in engineering and process improvement. So I'm a big fan of those, but we were short-sighted. We didn't test these things. We didn't understand how they were going to affect us over time. So gluten in America is one of the biggest inflammatory compounds, one of the biggest inflammatory proteins. Okay, so next, we're on to insulin resistance, which is the third reason that you might get cognitive decline or Alzheimer's. And that's huge. So a little bit of my family background is that I have Alzheimer's on one side of my family, and I've got diabetes on both sides of my family. I'm definitely a girl of there, but by the grace of God go I. And I also work really hard to make sure that I don't do those things. So I eat like a diabetic, even though I'm not one. I exercise in order to do my best to prevent these things. You know, there's a lot of grace that happens when you do what you know to do now. So, and that is of course why I did the Olympic triathlon this weekend, which went amazing, and I finished really strong. So thank you to everyone for all of your support. Okay, so back to the insulin resistance. What's really important about this is that Alzheimer's is now being called type 3 diabetes because it happens in the brain. It happens as a result of constantly being exposed to the insulin pathways. I talk to a gentleman, this happens pretty regularly. I'll talk to someone who primarily what they eat is meat and sweets. Meat and sweets. And of course, we're Americans. We love meat and sweets. I think back a little while ago, we even had a deep fried, like some pork sausage with syrup on it that was served at the state fairs, right? And we love our deep fried Snickers bars and all this stuff. I mean, I grew up having peanut butter and jelly and chocolate ice cream and chocolate milk almost every single day. But the thing was that I didn't know better at the time, and that was what I knew, right? So we all come from places that we did things that we didn't know were better. We didn't know that there was a better way to do them. Now that I know that there's a better way to do things, this morning I'm drinking my delicious matcha tea, which is organic green loose leaf tea. There's no sugar in it. It's just tea and water. And my body loves this because it's an anti-inflammatory. It helps to regulate blood sugar. It tastes yummy, and it's a cozy way to start my day. And it's got a really rich flavor. I have a palate that likes richness. So type 3 diabetes. A lot of people really think that they've, done enough. They've made enough sacrifices. And the truth of the matter is it just depends on your body. And so it's the same with what is the most inflammatory food. That's a trick question because it really depends upon your body. In my body, if I eat anything dairy, I can feel it in my right knee almost immediately. Almost like within 5 minutes I'll feel it. So that's very inflammatory food for me. But there's other people, they can eat dairy no problem and they don't get inflammation. It depends upon your bacteria, flora, and fauna. And the reason that exists is because we are only 10% human cells. The rest of our cells are bacteria and fungus and viruses and parasites. And I know that all sounds super gross, but actually, those little critters are what help you make poop, and you would not be alive today without all of those other little hitchhikers on board. So you got to take care of your bugs, and you got to make sure that your bugs don't get uppity. Because if you get too many bugs, or if you get them in the wrong places, so we hear all the time about these horrible E. coli infections, and they're terrible. But E. coli exists in our body every single day, and in fact, we need it. The same with staph. We need those things in our body. We just need them in the right place in our body. If E. coli is in our lower intestine, it's doing the right thing and it's where we need it to be. If it's in the upper GI system, like our stomach, then it's possibly fatal in the wrong conditions. So it's much more about things being put in their place, well organized in the body so that they can keep each other in balance. And that's really important because, for example, one of my worst experiences of my life was I'd had this really bad candida infection in my knee. And I had gotten my knee. It was an amazing story. I went to go see the gentleman who would become my teacher, my Qigong teacher. I went to go see him, and the swelling all came down within a couple of hours. I walked in on crutches, or I hobbled in on crutches, and I walked out without 2 hours later. And one of the things that he told me was that I had a candida infection in my knee. Well, I didn't even know that was possible at the time. But as soon as he told me that, I immediately stopped eating everything that could possibly feed candida, and that was all sugar and all mold. And by the way, if you've never done this and you think you are eating healthy, it's really hard because all sorts of things have mold in them, or can have mold in them, like coffee and walnuts and other foods that seem like they should be okay are not the right thing if you have a mold toxicity, if you have a capacity for mold. So I stopped eating everything that could possibly feed the candida right away. And I started feeling really, really, really great. In fact, I was eating 3,000 calories a day, but I was losing weight. I was my trimmest that I had ever been because it's sugar. There's good calories and there's bad calories. There's sugar that turns into fat in our bodies, and I wasn't eating any of those things. So I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know the words, but I was doing a thermogenic, ketogenic, intermittent fasting diet back before it was cool. And it worked really, really great for me. This is something that can be done for short periods of time for healing properties. But what happened next was what was horrible. And what happened next was that I didn't realize that not only did I have a candida infection, but I also had an H. pylori infection. And when I brought the candida down, the symptoms of the H. pylori infection manifested. I'd had this for a long time. It's just that the two bugs lived in symbiotic combination, and as long as they were both there, then everything worked fine. As soon as one of them went away, then I had the symptoms. So the candida was here, and I dropped the candida down, and then I had the H. pylori infection out of nowhere. And let me tell you, that was horrible and excruciating. And some of the foods that were, like, obviously I'm eating the healthiest on the planet at this point, and some of the foods that were healthy were horrible for me, like avocado. avocado is supposed to be great for you. But avocado and onions were two of the foods that were causing me the most gastrointestinal distress. So back to, it's very important that we have our bacteria, flora, and fauna balanced and in healthy harmony with one another so that we can receive all of the benefits and blessings of a peaceful internal environment. And a peaceful internal environment helps you to maintain composure for your external environment and to be strong and centered for that. And the reason that that's really important is because stress is the number one driver of messing up your hormones and messing up your digestive system. I mean, have you ever tried to eat a big meal right before you're about to give a presentation? It doesn't work. On Sunday morning, right before my race, I was able to eat a couple of things. I was able to eat a little bit of eggs and a little bit of a SP Complete shake, which was awesome and a really great way to start my day. But I couldn't eat a huge breakfast because my body was thinking about race day start, and it was thinking about, okay, do I have all the things I need? In short, my energy was going to the parts of my nervous system that were not my gut, not my digestive system, which is the enteric nervous system. So because of that, I ate a little bit less than I usually would so that my body would be able to digest what I gave it and not be overly burdened with eating food that it couldn't digest. Okay, so type 3 diabetes and insulin resistance is one of the biggest causes of dementia and cognitive decline. So put down the honey bun that you might be eating right now and do your brain a favor and switch to foods that are more genuinely fulfilling rather than the ones that just make your tongue happy in the moment. All right, this is Dr. Cynthia Clark with Longevity Wellness. Have a great day and keep those brains happy and healthy and smart.